Good evening. This is April 9th. It's 5:30. We're at the Hyde Park Central School District's business office for tonight's meeting. May I have a motion to enter executive session for confidential matters pertaining to the employment or future employment of particular person or persons and corporation and collective bargaining negotiations, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're starting a little bit late, but at this time, may I have a motion to exit executive session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We are now in regular session. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance.
That helped, actually. I want her to go. Right, of course.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you take these for shredding after? Sure.
Thank you very much. There are no agenda modifications tonight. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Adopting the bill? Opposed? Thank you. That brings us to Pride.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Actually, this covers the time period of spring break. We had a little bit of good publicity about our softball field trip down in North Carolina, with Allison Pritchard being front and center of that. Spring sports are trying to get underway. I think it's been more rescheduling than scheduling. There are two exciting events at FDR coming up. The FDR Talent Show is this Friday, and the following Friday on April 17th is the President's Men pageant, or whatever they call it. So very entertaining, keeping our kids entertained on a Friday night by watching their peers have a lot of fun. So with that, if you had a chance, moving on, if you had a chance to see the Northern Duchess news, we have Cerule's own amazing race. And Katie Cerule, well, the name Cerule is synonymous with rowing in Hyde Park. And Katie Cerule, who is a 2006 graduate of FDR and actually just graduated from veterinarian school, came back to us with an idea to create her own amazing race to the river, and that is this Saturday. So they'll be starting at FDR. I'm not really well versed in the television show Amazing Race, but my understanding of what Katie has organized is that there will be teams of 2 and 4 to replicate crew boats, and it's almost like a scavenger hunt that will take them from FDR down to the river. I do know that no points are given for fastness during the driving time. It's only for performance and task completion at each of the different stations. So you may see some pretty wild antics going on in Hyde Park on the 11th as this fundraiser for the crew team replicates the amazing race. So thank you, Katie Cerule and her entire family, but especially Katie, thanks for coming back as a graduate to really do something that's positive for the crew team and really just fun for the whole town. And that's all I have on Pride.
Anybody else have anything for the thing? I know we've been away from school, so there's not a lot of things have been happening. All right, let's move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, so for the informal part of the report, the Interact Club is hosting the very first ever Relay for Life at FDR High School. It is on April 25th. It is a high school version. It's not the overnight version. It's from 1 to 9. We have a link to it on our website. There's still plenty of room for teams, participants, whatever. But again, the Interact Club is hosting this. We are happy to have the very first ever high school version of Relay for Life. We're working with the same person that supervises the one at Wallkill and at Arlington High School. I wanted to mention test refusals. Where to begin?
Today's phone call?
Each year, we try to navigate our way through this very difficult situation that we're placed in. As an educational agency, since time began, standardized tests are given. In recent times, the number of standardized tests has increased. And I won't go into too much detail about anything else about testing, but I will say that we will be administering all of the assessments. They are an important part of our educational program. The state has not provided really any further guidance on the concept of test refusals. To our knowledge, there's only been one change, and that's in Appendix P of the administration of the testing manual. So our understanding is that nothing other than that has changed, so that if a student refuses a test, refuses to take the test, we will not give them the test. They will have the option to read quietly while the assessment is being administered. In the case of the middle school, if it's disruptive and there are large numbers, they'll be moved to an alternate location during the assessment time. Our whole approach to test refusals is to minimize any anxiety this causes for students and to keep students out of whatever adult conflict is going on surrounding the controversy of the assessments. So I'll go back to Appendix B, because right now the state says that the only way a test refusal can happen is that the student themselves refuse the test. We certainly have a lot of letters from parents indicating that their child will be refusing. Some of them even indicate that they're going to refuse on behalf of their child. Technically, unless we hear something from state ed, that's really not the case. The student has to refuse. But with that said, I'm going to go back to, we're going to try and employ as humanistic approach when we're dealing with children. But Appendix P of the manual says that the coding of 999, which is what people use for the test refusal, is to be marked when a student is absent because of a refusal, actually refuses the test, is absent for any session of the test, or present for the test and does not take. So there is one, that last bullet is more like a silent refusal. So we won't push children. We'll try and monitor the letters to the best of our ability as they come in from parents. The children will start off in a testing location, and then we will direct any student who's indicating in any way that they're not going to take the test, that they can read a book. That was that.
Okay. And
An enrollment study, that is wanted to give a verbal update. At the time the board set their goals, we were really thinking, there was some thought that, and continues to be a sentiment, that we want to stay ahead of the next curve, that we don't want to find ourselves in a position where this has to happen quickly. But over the last month or so, I revisited the report that we were left with. I pored over the numbers, I pored over a couple of other concepts, and really tried to say, okay, where are we right now in space and time? So from the time that the report was written to now, we are down 100 students between 2013 and 2015, 105, and depending on your source, whether you're looking at in-building enrollment or in-district enrollment, you know, you can give or take a few. But what we know now, since the last report, are a couple of things. One, we have increased the number of self-contained classes within our district from 7 to 10. So we have 3 less classroom spaces available than we did at the time the report was written. We also know, based on the information in the report, that we have not declined enrollment enough at 5th grade, or anywhere near that, to move 5th grade to Haviland Middle School. So that is not a current option if that were to be thrown in the mix. The other thing that we know right now is that the declining enrollment that we have experienced since the study was written is not enough to close another elementary school. The cost of conducting another study is between $15,000 and $30,000, depending on the quotes that come in or the previous quotes. That's a ballpark. So my recommendation is that to put your goal on hold, because to spend the $15,000 to $30,000 now, knowing that we will not have a recommendation to close a school either this year or really next year, we're still a couple of years away, we should postpone spending that money. In looking at the whole issue again and putting some thought into it, I also thought that there were some other things, some intermediary steps that I think the district might want to consider before we conduct another enrollment study or while we're waiting. And one is to revisit the attendance zones. The original report recommended a couple of a geographic rezoning that placed, if you remember, that originally about 37 families were going to be relocated to Ralph R. Smith. In the end, all but one went to North Park, and we've certainly heard how North Park has quite a large number of students. So it may be time to revisit the attendance zones again, and that could be twofold. That could be giving an option to the people who were originally slated to go to Ralph R. Smith. If you would like to go to Ralph R. Smith, sort of have a dual system for a while, and all this will take some time sitting down with George over the summer, and or is it time to say we need to phase in our new attendance zone, so if you're new to the school district or you have new and younger kids coming up, if you live in this catchment area, you go to Ralph R. Smith, not North Park. It was a highly volatile and very painful time when the study was completed, and we certainly made a lot of difficult decisions and made some concessions to keep families and children and neighbors together. But I think as an intermediary step, we should definitely look at the attendance zones again. The other thing that I thought we might want to consider is that prior to moving students again, we should look at adults. And the building that we're in right now, we owe $600,000+ on. It costs us approximately $227,000 a year to maintain. This building is not eligible for aid, either on an annual basis or for any repairs that we need to do. And I'm just throwing it out as a consideration. Is it time to, before we look at closing another elementary school, if you look at total district property and ownership, is it time to say, move central office out of here into the building, into buildings as room occurs or all at once, or phase it in, and maybe while we're phasing it in, maybe we move front offices into a building or buildings, rent out the front part till we have time and figure out how to move the back part. Should we be looking at why do we need so much storage? How much would it cost to digitally store all of our information, so we don't need large-scale buildings to take care of file boxes? What would the cost of moving whole storage rooms full of records into digital records? And again, you know, as we've been moving into Hyde Park Elementary and doing some other shuffling, there's a good possibility that maybe before we close the school, maybe we think of downsizing number of buildings, this one included, and move central office into the buildings. It is not unheard of we're already split. There are some offices that you naturally want to keep together, but it's not unheard of that, you know, central offices, you know, maybe a couple are in this building, a couple in the building. We're still friends with Aviva, and we miss her, but it's very workable. I'll just add in that, you know, the one central office experience I had where central office, the whole central office was attached to the high school, was a phenomenal experience. We should be as close to the kids as possible. I have to get in the car to see children, but that's just a personal thing, and I should keep my personal stuff out of it. But with all seriousness, while we're waiting to spend the money on an enrollment study to know that, you know, we'd actually have a recommendation that we can act on, whether that's a year, 2 years, 3 years, is it worth considering that the next move is out of this building? So that is the enrollment study update. I think it's a decision of the board to say whether or not you want to put your goal on hold, or should we actually spend the money to conduct a study now?
Comments from the board?
Yeah, I've actually got at least one question, and you mentioned that it's not, we're not at a point where we can think about moving 5th grade to Haviland. Mm-hmm. What numbers do you have in mind, or what do we look at, and how far away are we, and
I didn't get to how far away we are.
okay.
What I did was I looked at, in the study, I should have flagged the page. In the study, they flagged that the range of students between such and such a number, you know, let's say 230 to 250, that range will not fit in Haviland Middle School. I had forgotten that was part of the study. And if you look at our upcoming 5th graders for the next 2 or 3 years, they're right around there. It's after the 2-year mark, 2 years from now, that it starts to drop again.
Yeah, and it's got to be relative to how many students we have in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as to what the available space is. So, you know, I think it'd be good to know what those statistics are, just so we can watch them, so we can, you know, that they can be we can trend and not be caught off guard that we're getting closer than we think we are, if that's one of the matrix that we're using.
Absolutely, I think we can do that, and my preliminary look indicated that we were 2 years away from considering 5th grade, but we could do a little bit more work with the information we have now without spending the $15,000.
Okay. And I can address, or I can offer some insight as to what it is to move district offices into an academic building. And it's a great experience, but look at it, you know, we need to look at it very seriously. The administrative offices have a lot of traffic to them that the education buildings don't have now. And I think we want to be very careful to make sure that whatever we're doing, it's appropriate, that we've got we're able to have the appropriate entrance, preferably probably a separate entrance, parking, traffic. There's a lot of logistics there that can't be taken lightly. But at the same time, I mean, I walk in a hallway where I see, you know, little kindergarten kids, and actually I went in and sat with a language class the other day and talked to them about a capital project and threw out some blueprints on the floor, and it was a great experience for them and myself. So, you know, it's good to be in touch. I think it does kind of ground you and keep everybody focused as to what the real mission of the organization is, but there's some logistic issues that you want to work through.
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about the the building in its entirety. There's other issues with operation and maintenance, with technology departments, food service departments, so it's not just a group of people, it's an operation. You'd have to find a space to work out of,
Yes.
which you wouldn't find in the school building.
Well,
Typically you wouldn't.
typically, and I say typically because, and, you know, this is how rumors fly, but let's just take for example, actually, Aviva's department has a lot of interface with community, and for this building, for the front end of this building, the offices, I'm agreeing with all your points. They're absolutely 100% valid. Aviva's department has the highest traffic area of people coming to district offices, and that was very much a consideration with putting Aviva at the front of that building and making sure that that entryway and accessibility wasn't frustrating for parents. In fact, that was probably the number one reason why Aviva's department over other departments went over there. If you've ever had to walk through this building, it's a bit bizarre. And pupil services was somewhere right in the no man's land in the middle. And it was frustrating for people to have to come here, speak to 3 people, wind through a hallway before they could even get back to the people that they needed to see. So now pupil services is right there at the front of the building, handicap accessible, family friendly, and Aviva's done a beautiful job with, you know, making sure that when families come in, they feel welcome and have a place to go. With that said, for facilities, we have a lot of deliveries, we have food storage, but facilities was at Haviland Middle School at one point, and there is a very logistical place to maybe investigate that area that was used for facilities once before, to look at that again. But you're right, it's not as simple as a bunch of office people. We have a walk-in cooler the size of this room, maybe not, maybe half. And certainly all of the supplies and delivery. So that's a big consideration, and that's why it might be a phase 1, phase 2. But just worth doing exactly what we're doing now. Let's explore that a little, and maybe, you know, at the end of the day, there's nowhere to go. But I think unless we look, we don't know. Actually, all of administration was.
Any other comments? Questions?
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Rychak just talked about was the idea of perhaps offering students some choices in terms of which elementary school they go to. That was certainly done when we closed Hyde Park Elementary. I'm not sure which way to go there. I know that we have a large population at North Park that's much larger than the other 3 elementary schools. If I had it to do over again, we would have addressed that when we closed Hyde Park Elementary. But things as they stand, I am in favor of leaving things alone.
Okay. So the question is, before us is, do we want to have the study or not?
I think the superintendent makes a valid argument to not do it this year. I mean, you know, given the research, preliminary research done, if it's really not going to tell us anything, or what it's going to tell us is a year or 2 or 3 out, then there's probably no point in spending the money now. You know, the reason for doing it was, do we know where we stand, and, you know, are we, you know, up against, you know, oh, there's either an elementary school that's now half empty, or you know, they're falling out of the windows at North Park, and we need to think about redistricting, or any kind of scenario that caught us by surprise because we weren't paying attention. And if we were looking at, if we are looking at these things and have recognized that we kind of know where we are and there's no need to panic yet, then I would argue that, well, do we need to spend the money yet? If it's only going to tell us something that, yeah, you need to do something, but it's not for 2 to 3 years, well, a lot can happen in that 2 to 3 years, so maybe it makes sense to just kind of hold off and wait. As long as we're careful about monitoring year to year, and don't, you know, I mean, I'm still, I think, you know, having been on the board a long time, and you go back to talking about buying this building, you know, the thought process behind buying this building, and I was on the board and very much in favor of it, was, you know, and as Dan remembers, you know, and yeah, I guess Doug, you were here too,
Yeah, I
right?
was there.
You know, I mean, at the point we were buying this building, we were also thinking of throwing an addition on at the high school for a middle school. I mean, we had absolutely no idea what was going on from an enrollment perspective. The place was growing by leaps and bounds, and we hadn't looked out far enough, you know, to know that, you know, because then, you know, fast forward, so that was the reason, we need to get the heck out of schools. We were leasing a place way down on Violet Avenue, and we were throwing good money after bad, and, you know, but the point I'm trying to make is when we got to, you know, now fast forward, I went off the board for a couple of years, and just before I came back on, you know, I'm sitting there listening to this enrollment study and capacity study at the high school, and my mouth hit the floor because I had not realized what was going on with enrollment. And it was spiraling, and it was shocking how much it was dropping. And clearly something needed to be done. And, you know, and that's what drove us to, you know, Hyde Park, and it was a regrettable decision, you know, a beautiful little school. The reality is we couldn't keep operating the way we were with people rattling around in half-empty buildings. It didn't make sense from a business point of view, and with a tax cap coming, you know, you've got to look at cutting expenses. But, you know, now the reality is, you know, as we go forward, you know, and people keep saying, what's going on at Hyde Park? Well, yeah, people are moving out and all that, but the reality is, when, you know, I think of my childhood in the 70s and 80s here in Hyde Park, it's less people having less kids. You know, and you know, yeah, the world's changing, and things aren't the way they used to be, and yeah, that's why your enrollment's going down. That's just, so we have to just keep a sharp eye on that, and also the discussion about moving out of here and getting back. I'd be only in favor of that if things could stay relatively consolidated. I don't think I'd want offices scattershot all across the
Yeah,
difference,
no,
wherever there's a classroom
Yeah.
to shove people into.
No.
Yeah, I mean, because,
Yeah,
you know, you don't
no.
want,
No,
I
that's
also
not
don't
an
want traffic.
effective way to do business.
No, yeah, because
Yeah.
you're driving, everyone's driving all day
Yeah.
trying to get to each other, you
No,
know? You want
yeah.
to try to stay somewhat together and efficient, and,
Yeah.
and Perry makes excellent points about traffic. You know, there was a lot, you know, I remember when it was at Haviland, there was a lot of traffic in and out of Haviland, and it was awkward, and, you know, we kind of shoved folks up on was it the second floor? Yeah,
No.
we were up on the second floor of the old
First.
section,
First floor, right?
and second floor.
And second floor,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it was just, and you had to go around the
It was
back.
that
and
end,
It
it was
just,
that
yeah.
far end.
Yeah, it was just, it wasn't really the way to do business. And I'm not always convinced that unless you spend some money, and we just talked about trying to save money, you know, not that I'm, you know, and nobody here has a palatial office, but classrooms don't make, you know, unless you spend
Yeah.
some money, they don't make great offices. They're designed to be classrooms, they're not designed to be offices. So, you know, there's a lot of consideration you have to think about, you know, with that,
Okay.
so.
So is anybody in favor of doing a survey?
No.
What year was this last study done?
2000, it was delivered in 2012.
3 years now. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I don't think that we need to jump into anything more. It would be, I'd like to just have a little better understanding of what matrix you're watching, and get an understanding as to what that is and what assumptions are being made to trigger the next study. I guess part of it is that way we don't have to debate that later. It's better to look at it now and say, okay, we all agree with that, and now we just watch the numbers.
So we're in agreement to wait.
To wait for that, but I think we should look a little more at the attendance study for North Park. Is how much is that, the population of that school affecting that school versus the other elementary schools? And I would like to hear something from Principal Heck on what is the status of that school and how it is handling that volume compared to the other elementary schools. I think we should do due diligence there. I'm just trying to understand, how is that overcrowded affecting that school?
Can I ask the question too, because I should know, but I haven't seen our current enrollment scenario. What, by grade level, what's the current capacity, wrong answer, wrong question. Current enrollment at North Park, round numbers.
About close to 470, I was going to say close to 500. 470.
Okay, so.
Oh, wait, I probably do have.
I
it.
don't want to minimize what's going on at North Park, but,
I can tell you, at North
right.
Park, right now, 471,
Okay, so I don't.
as of March 13th.
Right. You know, I don't want to minimize what's going on at North Park, and obviously, obviously there's concern and issues here, especially maybe compared to the other buildings, but I did K through 6 at North Park in the 70s. We were always closing in on 600 kids in that building when it was a K-6 building. Never felt particularly crowded to me, so
Yeah.
I don't know what the issue is now, so.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't want to speak for Lisa, but I wouldn't say she's bursting at the seams, and in fact, there are some extra spaces there. I don't think that's it. But there are some large classes, and, you know, we wouldn't know how that would break out unless we sat down over the summer with George and said, if the people in this catchment area were to go to Ralph R. Smith, let's say, would that alleviate any of the large class size numbers? And is it worth it to say to parents, is it worth considering that any new families, yeah, you're going to go to where the new boundary lines were drawn, and then to the parents who had made the decision not to go where the new boundary lines were, say, it's your choice, but phase out that old attendance area, so that we're respecting the decision that we made to permit people to send their kids to North Park versus Ralph R. 3 years ago, but say, okay, but moving forward, knowing that, you know, we had a study done and this was the new attendance zone for that, do we want to go back to the true intent of having some more people go to Ralph R. Smith based on that recommendation, and phase it in with new families and give existing families an option? And I won't know until I speak with George whether or not, you know, if that had, you know, 4 or 5 classrooms that went from, you know, 29 to 26 or 25, you know, and not made Ralph R. Smith all the way up to 30 for every class, you know.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah,
accept that
it
argument
would
that.
take a little to look at.
Compared to the other schools, it could be a class size comparison issue. But I
Yes.
don't want people running around saying the place is bursting at the seams.
No, it's
'cause
not.
That's not the
It-
case.
it-
Right,
That is
okay, right,
definitely
okay.
not the
Right.
case, and in fact, you know, we do have, we have ample room at North Park for the number of students that we have.
I think it would be a kind of a difficult task for transportation to phase in with new students going to a different school, you know, with pickups, different sites, different locations, so you're creating another route sometimes, maybe, because you're phasing it in. It seemed to me you'd have to do it 1 year, from 1 year to the next, take that zone and move them.
Yeah, it would really, you'd really have to look at it.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that would work.
Yeah, it may or may not, and the only way to do it would be to sit down with George and say,
Right.
is there any merit to this?
Well, as it is, there are double bus runs.
Yeah, there's double bus
Yeah.
runs
Yeah.
everywhere.
There are
Yeah.
already,
We're-
because there
Programs
are
everywhere.
children in the one zone that would normally go to Ralph Smith that are going to North Park. That's already, it's already happening. But, yeah, okay, so we're agreed we're not going to have thing. Are we agreed that we're going to have the superintendent pursue possibly selling this building? Any thoughts on that as an idea going forward?
I would think that we've got a lot of homework to do
Well,
before
yeah,
we
yeah, but I
ever
mean, you can't-
consider,
I don't- yeah.
I mean,
But what's what I'm asking, are we pursuing that homework?
well, I think it goes hand in hand with,
Think of that.
I think it goes along with looking at enrollment and
Right.
as part of that exercise may be to look at the feasibility of relocating. Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the discussion. I don't know that it's not a separate discussion, I don't
Well,
think.
let me ask the question differently.
Okay.
Do we wait 2 years, have the new enrollment study, and then talk about possibly selling this building, or do we start those discussions now?
Yeah, I think you wait.
Yeah, I think you
Wait
do
for
it
the
together, because one, yeah, I mean, it would, I would say you do it together. I think it's a matter of if we're
Okay.
looking at any reshuffling, we look at it with,
The reason I ask is it's going to take a long time to sell this building, if ever.
Well, and that's the point, so I wouldn't look to run and clear out of here either, to then leave an empty building that has to be, that's gonna still cost to maintain.
Right, right.
I just want
The
to,
other, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the other thing that comes to bear there is that we plan to reopen Hyde Park Elementary when the population growth comes back to this area. I think it would be as short-sighted to sell this building because we close a school as it would be to close a school. We're always gonna need to put administrative staff someplace. And if we're planning to reopen the buildings, then where are they gonna move back out to in that eventuality? So,
Well, in
At
2
the-
years, we might be to the point of closing an additional building.
I understand, but one of the lessons we learned when we closed HPE is that you should always plan on reopening the building eventually.
Well, again, and I think
Yeah.
the other thing to look at is the efficiency of operating this building. When we close a school, we close the school because we didn't have enough students to efficiently operate that school or all of the schools. So it may be that we get to a time when there's time, when enrollment is dropped and we may need one less elementary school or one less school in the mix. But I think we're still going to need an administrative facility. I mean, we've got to have something like this. So the question is, does it really make sense to move from this building into a school building simply to prevent from shutting it
shutting
down?
it down, yeah.
I'm not sure I'm not sure that makes sense, because, I mean, the efficiency, I think this space, it's not palatial, but it certainly, I think it functions well, I think, for our needs. Much more than, I mean, that's one thing, you will lose efficiency moving administrative offices into an education building. I mean, classrooms are not built for offices. I mean, there's a lot of inefficiencies of space in moving in, unless you start doing a lot of modifications.
I'm going to say something just in a joking way. This place wasn't built for offices either, but it had already been reconfigured, but I'm just teasing.
Yeah,
It's a
so-
valid point. And Viva wanted to say
If you want
something.
me to speak to having done it and living there, it's beautiful and we love it there. And our whole department is using 4 classrooms that we share by people who ordinarily would share and want to communicate with each other. 5 tiny office spaces that just happen to have already been offices or small group works, and a break room.
Yeah.
So, we're using just a small part of the whole thing. And it costs very little. I mean, there was really no real work done to move
Right,
us in.
right, and-
So
and-
so I'm just saying, it really can work.
But in those drafty old buildings, the heating system is not particularly efficient, and then when you get to the summertime, when you work all summer, and that's why we don't air condition classrooms, because we don't, well, way back in the day, we didn't have kids in the summer but now we've got these monster window air conditioners probably trying to cool you, and they're not as efficient as the central area you have in this building, and those are the
Yeah.
things that why schools don't make great offices, and that's the problem, so.
Okay.
And just one other thing, because I don't want to belabor it, but one of the good things that did come out of, all of this exploration and maybe a reassurance is, it is supposed to be, we're supposed to give an annual enrollment update every year by June. We can probably consider this one done for this year. But I think it's good to know that next year, there will be an enrollment update, even if there isn't a study. So I think the important thing that the board is doing is keeping this conversation alive, paying attention to the numbers, exploring all options, and just keeping the conversation going so that there aren't any surprises. So even though we're not going to do, or I think you're not going to have a study done now, we will look at the numbers again next year and every year thereafter. So it's an important exercise to go through annually.
The other thing that Greer mentioned just now, which I think is obvious to anybody that's spent much time in this building, is that this building isn't a great office building. And I wonder whether it wouldn't be worth a little bit of time at least to look at what it would take to make it a better office building. And, one of the thought processes that led me to that was the fact that the last meeting, 2 meetings ago, we talked about improving the boardroom and improving technology. One of the things that I started considering right away was the shape of this room does not really lead it to be a great meeting room. And what happens if we knock out this wall, for example? Well, okay, what happens if we, well, is it,
Maybe
is
the roof
it, is
over.
it weight bearing or not? But,
I don't know.
you know, and why do we need a hallway back here? And why do we need 2 hallways? And, you know, the strange flow of traffic in this building. So if it's not an efficient office building, that's hurting us. And maybe it'd be worth talking to an architect about what can be done.
Well, I think the efficiency might be more in heating and cooling. I don't think the configuration, while it's not ideal, I don't think it slows our efficiency work-wise down. I mean, you know, regardless of the cockamamie 4 ways I have to get to Cora's office, I still have a telephone and we still manage to find each other. But, so I think if there was some consideration to, say, a better presentation space may be worth exploring, but to spend money on the rest, it's
Okay,
not slowing us down. But it'd be a luxury. I think if you're gonna spend money anywhere, it would be maybe on looking at the heating and cooling system in this building.
well, one of a pet project that I have thought about and talked about for several years now, and this is gonna make everybody roll their eyes, but the security at the front of this building is much, much lower than the security of any other building in the district.
Well, well, good news with the new camera system, we did just there's now the camera, and we're getting the swipe card for this building. So we actually acted on that recommendation. That actually went through the safety team and facilities, and we're about to be able to badge swipe our way in here, and the camera. So that we're very soon, we're gonna be able to say we were light years ahead of what we were. We're gonna have, what, 3 badge swipe areas? And secure the whole perimeter of the building, so, yeah.
Okay,
I would ask that, you know, because I know we've had this, and we got it on all the schools, and I think it's great. And I recognize as a board member, you know, when we go visit a schools, we were just that visitor, so I never thought I had the right to or should be badging into a school. But I think I would ask that, you know, we get our cards replaced, that we can badge into here. We think we have the right to come and go as we please into this building. And
Oh,
I'd like
absolutely.
to have that, so.
Yeah.
Because I know the cards they issued me, the ID card is just the standard one, it's not the, yeah,
Oh,
so.
another swipe, yeah.
Right, which, and
Yeah.
that's fine, because I don't have any need to go swiping into schools. I mean, I buzz my way in. Well, I can't remember the last time I've been in during the day, but, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm fine with that. It's a requirement, and we should check in like any other visitor. But here, we should have the right to come and go as we please, and not be standing in the rain hoping somebody's noticing I'm buzzing, trying to, you know, get somebody to push the button to let the door unlock, so.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, we can move on.
Good.
I have the 2014-15 Employee Engagement Survey results and analysis.
Somebody wants to cue it up there?
It's on there, just move the slide forward 1.
Okay, sorry. 2 things have been posted for board docs. One I'm going to move through very quickly and really not spend a lot of time except the first couple of slides, and then I'll move into some of our preliminary findings. Through the course of doing the teacher survey and the parent survey and the student survey, a year ago, through the district leadership team, a recommendation was made saying if you're surveying the parents, the teachers, and the students, what about the rest of the employees? We have 300 plus teachers, but 700 employees total. So we're not only asking one fraction of our employees to give us feedback. So we did endeavor to give an employee engagement survey to all of our staff. And certainly, while there's some highlights and points that are that we're doing well, the survey did point us in the direction that we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of work to do on multiple fronts. And one in particular is that the way we conducted the survey, we need to break it down even further because a lot of people are lumped in together, and I'll get into that in a little more detail. So the good news is we did a survey and that we're being transparent. The good news is that we're going to act on the survey, and we learned a lot about maybe how to follow up and maybe future surveys. But some of the findings were, oh, do I need to turn it
You
on?
have to point
That
it out.
helps.
With the
Okay.
laptop.
So I'm going to move through the first few slides. This is what we get back from the organization K-12 Insight. So the employee engagement survey was one of their products, and we looked at it, and it looks at the overall engagement, shared values, leadership, communication, feedback and recognition, work environment, career growth, and training. And I'll tell you that the good news is that a majority of our employees feel very much engaged, very proud to work for public education. There is an agreement that, the children are the reason why we're here. That should certainly be 100%. But that we have a lot of growth to do in the area of communication and feedback, and in some instances, the work environment. The interesting thing about this survey is for a lot of the employees to ask a career growth question, they aren't career growth tracks. We don't ask the teachers about career growth. We ask them about professional development. We don't ask them, is this a stepping stone on your career to something else? So, we have to take into consideration that, we ask that question, but we don't really have very many positions where it's a career track. This is the breakdown of who took the survey. 150 employees took it via email. 7 of them took it through a custom URL, a web link that they could click on either through getting a piece of correspondence or a flyer. And then 1 person actually used the smartphone QR code. We received a total number of 198 surveys back from employees. We had 64 total employees respond from the elementary schools, 59 from the secondary, and 74 are staff members who are not school-based. We had a little information about years people working in the district, and more than half of the employees who took this survey have 10 plus years, and certainly 27% 6 to 10. So we're not getting information from, the majority of our information are from people who have been here for a while. And again, you may interpret results differently if the majority of the people who filled it out were in their first 5 years. These are people who have been here for quite a while. This was the breakdown on how we started to analyze the results. Clerical, teaching aides and assistants, and then we had in one larger category monitors, cafeteria workers, facilities and operation, transportation, and a couple people who might not fit into any of those particular titles. Did I just go backwards? Yes, I did. And we're not sure, maybe somebody marked other, and, there are some people who are teachers or considered teachers, but maybe took the survey because they don't have the title teacher. They're a social worker. They really should take the teacher survey because that's the one that was designed for them. Again, this is just one slide. 82% of the participants said that they often feel good about their job in public education. Now, is there a way for me to get to the next? I'm going to show this slide, and then is there a way for me to toggle right to the next presentation?
Yeah, all the
Okay.
presentations are right in line.
Okay. Do I have to go through slide by slide to get to it? Okay. So again, our findings showed that Overall engagement was high, shared values, pretty good, work environment. But we really have some questions when it comes into leadership, communication, feedback, and recognition. Again, we'll focus on the professional development category of training opportunities. It was interesting, in the transportation department, they all felt that they had the training they needed for the job, which is a very different question that do you get on the job training? Well, of course, they all have the training they need because they have to have a CDL license to have it. So a lot of what we're learning about this survey is maybe asking better questions, asking different questions, and breaking it out department by department. All of these numbers should be higher. The goal would be to have them higher. But if you don't give the people the survey and start to work on it and look at the information, then you don't have it. So it's a good step forward that we conducted the survey. Again, this is just a different look at it. 84% of our employees said that they're satisfied with the work that they do, that their assignments are interesting. 81% working for a public school system gives them a sense of accomplishment, and that they're motivated to do more than expected of them, over 75%. 73% are proud to work for the school district. This one's a little concerning. I'd feel comfortable recommending a good friend for this district. We want to see that higher. Working for my principal or direct supervisor definitely needs to be higher. And professional growth and long-term career planning. Again, we need to sort that out should we replicate any of this. We're not setting out to be a career path organization, but we certainly want to make sure we provide the training opportunities they need to do the job. After this, it's all the nitty-gritty slides. I'm going to go right to the presentation. The administrative team has started to do the work. We've only had 2 sessions. We have a lot more to go into digging into this data and saying, what are we going to do with it? As a reminder, all of the parent and teacher surveys, that work is being done at the building level, in addition to the district level. But this work is really district level work. And when I say district level work, that means all the building principals, the directors, all the administrators are analyzing this data and will become part of writing the improvement plans to address areas of concern. Okay, back. Okay. So I had to put this presentation together before we even had our second exercise into looking at the data, and that was just today. So some of this is a reiteration of what were some of the highlights. And again, I just said them, so I'm not going to repeat them here. Some of the areas, and one of the things that we discovered is that if we're looking at facilities operations, monitors, and cafeteria workers, there may be big discrepancies into how those people are answering the questions. So if the overall score is low or high, we need to know which groups are rating which areas high and low. So one of the first things we know off the bat is we need to drill down more into the data so that we can know department by department how people are responding. Gets a little tricky in clerical. Yes, we want a work environment where every single clerical is rating us high on everything. But in any given department, there are only 2 or 3 clerical workers. So we need to design a system that part of what we're talking about, the conversations we're having, is if our clerical data indicates that there are areas where there's room for growth, it's going to be imperative that each department finds out from their clerical how they're rating. This is not going to be news to IBM people who constantly have to rate their managers. So it could be that all of my clerical staff is saying, horrible, 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 horrible. And I'm getting low marks across the board. And all of Aviva's clerical staff are saying, wonderful, 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 wonderful. And so the overall rating is 50%. Well, that overall rating of 50% isn't giving me information about my leadership and management, and it really isn't giving Aviva any information. So one of the first things that we're learning through this study is that if overall it's not looking good, we need to drill down and find out where is it not good and where is it good. So we're going to be making some changes. So improvement areas. Work being distributed fairly, 44%. Okay, who is feeling that work is not being distributed fairly, and how can we address it? Decision-making by district office is inconsistent and/or not understanding of employee needs. So that's an improvement area. I'm sorry, the category was work environment and leadership. And this is just the first broad brush. This is by no means an in-depth analysis. This was one session with the administrative team. As I said, we had a second one. Communication, positives. Employees know where to go to look for information, and for the most part, their job expectations are clearly communicated. Areas of improvement, level of influence and input from employees in decision-making. Well, you know what? We got low ratings because we don't ask them. There were some real obvious aha, or we said this morning, pardon my colloquial, but we broke one exercise we did not in relation to this into aha or oh crap, And, certainly if we don't give our employees, our facilities and operations people, our transportation, our clerical, if there's no opportunity for them to, if we don't ask them for input, they're not going to rate us high on input. So there are some very basic design systems that we can improve on in our district. Providing rationale and reasons behind key decisions. Yeah, you know what? We don't. We don't drill down that far to make that effort. In today's session, where we actually, in this session, we looked at the overall data response. In today's session, the team actually broke up and looked at transportation, clerical, teaching aides and assistants, and then the other group, F&O, monitors and cafeterias. And we came up with some even better ideas for communication. One of the things that became glaring is that we have no system for internal communication for employees other than teachers. Even to do the survey for the transportation department, they didn't have email addresses or access. We had to give a lot of paper surveys. But we thought, wow, what about an employee newsletter? That's not designed for, that could have some of the instructional information, but an employee newsletter that's some of the nuts and bolts and logistics and has some information and that goes directly to them in their mailboxes. We don't do that. The curriculum office has, in the last couple of years, implemented perspectives. It's an 8-page newsletter of all of our instructional programs, highlights, everything. We don't have a parallel piece for our other employees. Easy enough to do, different organizational structure, and a little bit of an effort, but an effort that absolutely has to be made. Feedback and recognition. I mentioned this the last time when I talked about the rollout. When we talk about any department, even if it's the transportation department, if we're getting low scores on feedback and recognition, that's not the transportation director's job. That is the job of every single person in the district. So if I go to the transportation department a couple of times a year, maybe a handful. I only go there formally once. If all I'm doing to provide positive feedback and recognition for our bus drivers is once annually in a formal way, I personally can do more. We personally can do more. So the interesting thing about conducting this survey is we got a lot of really honest feedback, And very quickly, we realized we did a lot of hold up the mirror. If I'm getting low ratings on positive feedback, am I giving them positive feedback? No. How hard is it? Somebody from Eric's group today said, we do gotcha stick coupons at Haviland Middle School, and it's called Gotcha for Being Nice. Everybody in this district could give a gotcha sticker to somebody in F&O who helps a kid who fell down or intervenes in a certain way. So we could do that. We could do Employee of the Month. We could, there's so many things that we could be doing that are part of a lot of organizational cultures, and we haven't looked at it in that perspective. And while some people say, wow, you're going to put this survey up and this looks like you got some low scores, yeah, but let's be as transparent as possible and let's get on this right away. And some of these things are very doable. I'm not saying a gotcha sticker is going to change the culture overnight, but internal communications, positive feedback are certainly things that are important and that we can start right away. As I mentioned, there's huge discrepancies in departments. And so when you look at the data as a whole, you've got about 4 categories that are 70% and above positive ratings and about 4 categories that are below 50%. So lots of room for improvement, but we need to do some drilling down, because if something is working in facilities, and when we drill down, we find out that facilities is working really well here, or clerical is working really well here. We may want to put in some global things, but we also need to find out where are the areas where our employees are really feeling that things are amiss. And unless we start to drill down, and we'll have to do that internally, and we put in systems of, so what's my 5-minute eval that I give to Deb and Lori at the end of the year to say, you know what, I get to evaluate you, but how about giving me that quick feedback? And how hard is that to say, you know what, they should have an opportunity to say, you know what, you're nasty on Fridays, you're nice on Mondays, what gives? Something. But it's valid. And a lot of what the survey has done is to point us in that direction. So the mini measurements we absolutely have to look at. If there's a problem with a department, or we need to look at that specific department, we need to celebrate where it's going well. And we are committed to transparency. And so there we are. There's our, starting tomorrow, the parent, teacher, and student surveys will all be online, as well as the employee engagement survey. We will have a portion on every one of our administrative meetings. We've already done 2. We'll continue out throughout this year. We will craft our plans, and we'll move forward. And it's an exciting adventure, and I look forward to it. And I think that collectively we all have a lot to offer into making this place as good as it can be for students, for teachers, and now specifically to some employees that for the very first time they've been asked to weigh in.
Thank you,
I'm
Greg.
going to stay up here. 'cause
Does
I'm in
anybody
front.
on the board have any questions or any comments that they'd like to make at this time? If not, we could move on to the,
Yeah, I
we
was,
do.
refresh my memory, was this offered to teachers and nobody responded, or this was only offered to non-teaching staff?
We had done 2 times in a row, not in a row, but 2 times we had repeated the teacher, parent, student survey. And when we were looking at it with the district leadership team, somebody said, why are you only asking the teachers? There's all these other employees. And we said, good question. When the survey first came up, because we had to do it as a focus school, those were the people we were told we had to survey, and that was a survey that was selected. But when the question was posed, why not survey all the other employees, we said, that's a good question, why not?
Okay. The other question I was curious about, there was 198 respondents. What's the total possible?
I'd have to get back to you on that exact number.
I don't need an exact number, 600, 1,000?
800.
Oh.
800, right?
Well, the total number of employees in the district is 700 plus.
Yeah.
There's about 340 teachers, so minus the 340 teachers. So let's just ballpark it 300 to 350.
Good
And we
enough.
had about 198 respondents.
All right, so that means that we had well over half of the employees respond. That's actually a pretty good response rate.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
We extended the survey when we found out that some departments couldn't access it or had difficulty. We extended it. We provided hard copies. We really made an effort to make sure anybody who wanted to take it could take it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quick comment. I think it was an excellent exercise. A lot of employers are doing it. Mine has done it the last couple of years. It's kind of the thing to do, and for good reason, because too many organizations really didn't really care what their employees thought, and then you start to find out, oh, that's why you have some issues in certain areas, or morale issues, or so. I think it's a good start. A lot of work to do, but that's okay. It gets you pointed in the right direction. Working in public education is hard. And especially in a lot of the support positions. Your salary is paid by the public, so you're always under scrutiny, and more importantly, or more realistically, it's a rare day when people come up and say, great job, whether it's a member of the public or not, but boy, people aren't afraid of coming up and telling you how lousy a job you're doing. And it just seems like it's nonstop, and that goes from, you right on down to, the last bus driver or cafeteria worker we hired. Everyone kind of feels it, and so I think, like I said, there's a lot of work to do here, I mean, obviously people want to be paid a fair wage, but you know what, a nice pat on the back once in a while doesn't hurt either, and acknowledging them as people, as human beings, and contributors to the organization, it goes a long, long way. So I think this is a good start, and like I said, keep up the, keep the foot on the accelerator on this, because I think there's certainly lots to do, and I think you'll find that you'll start seeing a turnaround in attitudes and morale and all the things that go with it, and you'll get an engaged employee group, and like you said, that number of will I recommend, that'll jump up, and out of that comes a lot of goodwill, not only coming back from the employees, but when they walk with a spring in their step and do they already do a great job, but when they even do a better job for everybody, and mostly for the students, it really will matter.
Okay, any other comments? I might say that the state of New York could help out a little bit on the morale building by actually giving us the money that we deserve, and not give us unfunded mandates and things like that. However, I agree with Kevin, a little goes a long way sometimes, so. And so are you ready for the budget presentation? Sure, take my water, all right.
Oh, this is yours?
Yeah, I'm going to take it, take it.
I'll take this one because I did already started. Sorry.
Sure.
I'm not even drinking it.
This is the last time that we present the budget to the Board of Education at the next meeting. It does become adopted by the board, and then it becomes all of our budget, but certainly adopted by the board. As is always the case, we have two propositions, one for the operating budget and one for our school bus replacement. Proposition 1, our general operating budget is $88 million. It reflects a 1.29% budget-to-budget increase, and the tax levy to get us there is a 1.77. That is what our tax cap formula indicates that we can go out for, and that is the budget that we prepared, is within our tax cap. We did reduce the budget. In fact, the reason why this presentation wasn't released until Monday, when generally it's out over the weekend, was the state aid numbers finally did come in. As of last Friday, we were looking at utilizing a $3.6 million of fund balance to close that gap. With the governor's run of state aid, we now have reduced that to 2.9 million, and then have actually included the employee retirement system contribution back, so totally reducing the overall budget by 3.2 million. I'm going to go quickly through some of the tax credit and tax freeze. The tax freeze, and again, this is probably, I think, the third time you've heard this. Tax cap has been in place now. This is the third year. This is the first year where we have to comply with the tax freeze and the tax credit. And that just means that we had to demonstrate that we are doing cost effective measures to the tune of $500,000 in order to be eligible for our residents to get their rebate. You have to do two things. You have to stay within the tax cap, and you have to demonstrate that you have had efficiencies that meet the criteria. For us, it was $500,000. The closing of Hyde Park Elementary, even though it was a couple of years ago, counts toward the efficiency planning. So we are within full compliance of that requirement. This is just more information. I said 500,000. It was $578,000. The cost savings from closing the elementary school was above $900,000. So we're well within our tax cap and our tax freeze. Just to give you a historical perspective of state aid runs, the gap elimination, as you'll see in 15-16, they have closed that gap a little bit more, but if we had full restoration of the gap elimination, we would have had an additional $1.4 million. Again, we would have utilized that much less fund balance. We do need to get to the point at some time in the near future where we're not relying on fund balance to put together our basic operating budget, but it's good news that we actually can for now. This is a difficult slide this evening in particular. This is a summary of our personnel changes. This is a change from the last slide that was presented. We spoke about the last time the addition of the Dean of Students at FDR, which meant we were putting back in another administrative position. We also need a secretary in the technology department, half a secretary for Medicaid, and I'll explain that. And the difficult thing is that if you look at the reductions, the reduction of the assistant superintendent for business, but the addition of a business manager. Every year in education, we are continuously asked to look at our administrative costs. And over several years, we have been responding to reductions in administrative costs. And those always are associated with a person, a human being, who has a job, who has been with us, who performs a full-time job. We have lost the director of guidance. Her name was Marissa. We lost the assistant transportation director. His name was Colin. We lost a person in the technology department. His name was Steve. We had a dean of students. We eliminated that position last year. When we eliminated the dean of students, we said that we were going to monitor it. There were a lot of people that were very concerned about whether or not we would be able to continue all of the work that had been started at FDR with a reduction in administrative costs. After careful consideration, it was determined that we could not, that in order to keep the momentum going and to address our graduation rate, we needed that dean of students to take care of all of the programs that put together the whole academic, social, emotional program that runs at the high school. We took a look at where else we could find something to offset that. A known structure is that in many positions you can have an assistant superintendent or you can have a director. And with great all of these cuts are very hard, but with real looking at how do we restructure, we landed on the elimination of the assistant superintendent for business. And by going with a civil service business manager, that's a $30,000 cost saving that can help offset bringing that dean back. I say assistant superintendent for business, and that's Mr. Wayne Kurlander, and he's sitting right here in front of us. And I have had to inform him that as a cost-saving measure, we are eliminating his position. And that is in no way a reflection on the 10 years of service with past budgets and significant cost saving to the district. These are the hardest decisions we make, and every time we respond to please cut administrative costs, it's us telling somebody, Wayne now, Colin before, Maritza before, that they no longer have a job. Our goal and my commitment is to see Wayne through this transition. Maritza has a job and actually had a more of a promotional job. Colin has a job, and so our goal is to, first of all, thank Wayne for his years of service and successful budgets and all of the money-saving measures, and to help you through this transition. The impact on reconfiguring that position is that there are certain things that the business manager cannot do that will be taken on by my office, and so my job will be restructured. It's not a full, I'm not gaining 100% of Wayne's job. That would be absolutely impossible. But the business manager can do a certain percentage of what he did, and the remainder will be a restructuring of the superintendent's role. So Wayne, he has been just unbelievable through this process, and is just want to thank him again for his years of service, and knowing that these are not easy decisions that we make. So what are our mandated increases to the budget? Health insurance, all of our salaries, all of our payroll taxes. Everything keeps going up. As you know, our state aid is not going, it's going up a little, but it's not to where it needs to be to offset all of these. All of our debt service is accounted for. Both our past and future capital projects, our bus and vehicle amortization schedule, and our energy performance contract. We're in good shape with our debt service. Tax cap, we've already mentioned that. Last year, it was 1.46 was our allowable levy growth. This year, it's 1.62, which translates, once we put it all into the formula, of a 1.77% tax levy. Kind of a repeat. If we did not have the money from the reserves, the employee retirement system that our auditors recommended we take out of reserves and put toward the budget, and if we did not have the fund balance to put toward the budget, that would mean we would be going out for a tax levy of 7.43. Obviously, that would not fly. This is a breakdown of all of the revenues that we'll take to put our budget together. This is a pie chart indicating the same thing. This is the slide that is always, we look at that administrative costs, and we always try to stay at under 10%. We don't have the percentages, but we do have the dollar amounts, and we are under the 10% administrative costs. Our budget history with increases and decreases. At the lowest point, our budget to budget, we actually went down this year. A budget to budget is 1.29% increase. All of the budget builders get it now. People are just putting in reasonable requests and really know that there's not a lot more they can ask for. as they build their budgets. State aid as a percentage of the budget, as you can see, it's creeping up a little each year. Certainly not back to where it started to decline. The real indication of decline started around 2008-9, and then, of course, the real serious dip. But we're coming back up each year. The state aid runs give us a little bit more. The tax levy increase, you want to keep that relatively flat. So since 2010, we've been doing a pretty good job of not having peaks and valleys on our tax levy. Again, if our budget vote goes down, we have to go right to contingency, and that means $1 million. And that has to come from somewhere, so it's students, programs, personnel. By law, you have to take out equipment, so of the $1 million that we would have to reduce to go to contingency, $600,000 will come right out of the technology budget. Sorry, Steve. It's not just Steve, but that's by law. And then school supplies, you have to cut that out. Outside building revenue, you have to start charging people. So those are the things that have to come out. If we were on contingency, we'd still be looking at finding another $400,000 in cuts. Where does the $400,000 in cuts come from? This slide goes up every year because these are pretty much the only non-mandated things we do for the most part. Not to say there isn't other places you could gain, some money by squeezing some more budgets, but when you're talking about $400,000, you've got to seriously look at some places to find $400,000, not, $100 here and there. You need some bigger chunks. So our proposition, the difference between a proposition and a contingency is a budget to budget moving from 1.29% increase to 0.13% increase. Okay, so the mantra here is we've got an $88 million budget. Budget to budget increase is 1.29%, and our tax levy is 1.77%. George was here to give us the Proposition 2. Net cost to us after state aid is $384,000 to stay on target with our bus replacement cycle. Our budget hearing is May 7th. The last day for voter registration is May 12th, and the vote is May 19th.
Thank you, Greer. Is there any questions?
Just, Greer, on the 18th slide, just something that surprised me. Basically because I guess I've fallen into the pattern of listening to what Cuomo has to say, but what I've heard, and finally, when the budget was finally announced, he was saying, well, if, the legislature fell in line, I got all I wanted, so I got I got the changes and responsibility and other things that I needed, so I'm gonna release all the money, which is a significant increase.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at the, that one chart, and it says the significant increase turns out to be 0.03% higher percentage of the total cost to run this district.
Oh, I hadn't looked at it in that way.
It was 29.80%, the contribution for the state last year went to 29.83 this year.
It's not, yeah.
It's, with all of his touting, all of what was going on, all of the money numbers, and my question really is that because the distribution of that extra money plus what was in pot got shifted in a direction where we didn't get as much of it as we usually got in the past because of other things? Or is it just that the numbers have been totally inflated in a sense by him compared to what the real impact is at the school level?
Well, I think you're looking at two different things. The percentage
What
of the
slide you
budget stayed the same. The actual money that we got increased.
Yeah, the money increased.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about significant increases, and I'm saying significant
Well, no,
increases.
he's talking about significant increase in the money he's giving you.
He's giving us, yeah.
Not in.
But I'm looking at what,
He's a politician,
Yeah,
come on.
but I'm looking at what we got as a district,
As a percentage.
You know, no mention of the $16 million he's accumulated in his war chest over the last 7 years as he kept taking it away from us. Or the fact that he reduced how much he's taken, he didn't give any of it back, really, in a sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some, but that number surprised me. I thought, I expected to see that the shift, there would have been a significant shift in it, that he picked up a little more of our total cost, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, and we're just fortunate we weren't, if you remember the Poughkeepsie Journal article, we're just fortunate we're not one of the districts that got less
Yeah,
because of the formulas.
Because of the formula.
the formulas, I guess.
Any other comments or questions?
Go ahead, go ahead.
I've got a comment about the capital components. I appreciate the number that Wayne and his staff came up with, 1.74 increase is pretty low. But the majority of that increase is the debt service that we gained a couple $100,000. I had a chance to look at the individual budget codes for the operation and the maintenance of the district. And there's pretty good increases in it that the board or the public really isn't made privy to, and I think they should be a little more transparent with that. One of as an example, there's a 10% increase in custodial salary increase, 10%. Seems like a lot of money. There's changes in there's overtime was cut off for operation and maintenance. Overtime was just cut to zero. What are they gonna do for overtime? Or extra building activities? There was an increase in equipment, contract equipment, which is substantial, 55%. So if you put all those things in perspective, the operation and maintenance had a pretty good size increase, more than a 4% it shows on the breakdown. So I think the board needs to see this stuff and review it and comment on it, ask questions about.
Yeah. I mean,
A
it could
little late
be,
now, I know
well, it
that.
could be that they have more people, so they need less. The salaries would have gone up if you had more people.
Well, that was
You would-
just
you're-
one
you're
example,
think-
that
And if you had the right number of people, you wouldn't have to have overtime.
Oh,
There's a lot of, yeah, but you're right.
Reaching, really.
But you're right. No, well, that's,
Well, in the,
can happen.
to get to those percentages, you're minusing almost 100,000 in overtime. That's obviously drops you down to a good percentage. And one of the questions I would have asked was, what are you gonna do about overtime? How are you gonna pay for it? You're gonna have to have it.
Okay, I
just
think it's a good point. That's a good point.
I think we ought to look a little better next year at our budget numbers.
Any other comments?
The only other thing I would mention is on the last slide, there was mention that there are 2 openings for the board members, and that people should consider whether or not they have an interest in being on the Board of Education. Applications are available through the district clerk.
And you got like a week and a couple days.
Yep.
To get them
And-
in.
All you need is 40 signatures
Right.
and a promise.
Anybody else? I would like to make a comment and commend Mr. Kurlander for his service to the district. I know I was on the board when he was hired. District finances, I would have called at the time a train wreck. Wayne, I think in the first 3 years, got at least $10 million back that was owed to us from the state. So I'd like to thank him for his years of service and wish him very well in the future.
I have one question, but also another comment. I wasn't going to support the dean of students without some kind of reduction in administration costs. So it is an unfortunate way, Wayne, that we have to do this. But when you looked at the student survey, and one of the things they have in there, it shows a significant need for an additional administrator in the high school. Basically, with what they're dealing with now and the change in our society, we do need a dean of students there. So it's unfortunate, I'm sorry, Wayne, this is the way it's going, but we can't increase if we look at administration, it's about 9.5% of our budget. So we have to keep under that 10. But the other thing is with the change for teacher evaluations, the outside evaluator, is that going into play next year? And is that going to have to be funded? It's not funded by the state.
Right. It's not funded. Well, we haven't heard it's funded. We also haven't heard that that's finalized yet. The governor wanted all of that in place, but he released the budget. It's not in place. He has turned it over to the Commissioner of Education, which is an interim, and the Board of Regents. And my understanding is they have till June to work out this system. One of the things that might be interesting to look at for our district about the outside evaluator is, you know, and a lot of things have been thrown around. First of all, we have heard nothing that it would be funded. We've heard that, you know, the principal from this school can actually go to the other school and they could swap evaluations. We have a lot of directors, they could do it. So there's a lot of rumors flying around, but we don't have anything concrete yet.
Okay, anybody else?
You know, just a final comment on Wayne. Again, tough decision, and not one taken lightly nor relished. But it's interesting we left this slide up here because that's Wayne's legacy right there. And you know, pack that out and attach it to a resume. Really, I mean, this is not to make light. I mean, you know, he came slightly before that and really quickly got his arms around what we were doing with budgets, and you know, that chart right there is the result of his hard work over the years. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, Kevin and I came on the board at the same time, way back when. And as Doug indicated, the budget process contributed to the train wreck because it was disjointed and insane. And in many cases, if you asked 4 questions regarding the budget coming up and proposals, you might be, if you were fortunate enough to get one answer. And the other 3, oh, well, maybe. What I think has been noted in the time I've been on the board, or the last 10 years I've been on the board, is the consistency of getting valued, legitimate, honest, and timely answers to all of our questions regarding the budget process. Something that I had not seen from the years I spent on that side of the phone, of the microphones when asking questions from the audience, and something I had not seen the first 2 years I was on the board. And it's a significant thing, Wayne. It may be you did a job too good. In all honesty, and that can happen. You know, people look at it and say, you know, it's so well organized now that we can possibly survive this one. And that was a decision that had to be made. What changes and updates can we survive? In terms of, you know, when we discussed the other cuts we've made, there was always a question, and we've made several, you know, 5 cuts, 4 cuts in the administrative end. Only one's come back to bite us, and part of it was the fact that there were other factors introduced over the last year that hadn't been considered that sort of pushed the stone back in the other direction for the dean of students. But in your case, Wayne, you've done such a good job, and I know my wife appreciates it. I do. The amount of time you've saved me personally over the last 10 years in not sitting through the contentious, honorary, time-consuming, and sometimes wasted time of understanding the budget provided me with...
Yeah, with board members deducting $1,000 here and adding $2,000 to this line, and
Yeah.
on and on and on
You
it
know,
went.
and having the numbers and not having to ask again. It had to be at least 2 or 3 meetings a year that we didn't have to get involved in, which personally for me meant almost a full week's work when I was working. And now an ability to watch the NCAA tournament, I able to see parts of every one of the 68 games that were played this year. That would have been an impossibility in the past because they're always coincidental. So thank you, Wayne.
Okay. If there's no other comments, all right. This time, may I have a motion for public participation, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? I'll just remind everybody that we try to keep it to 3 minutes. We're not going to kill you if you go over 3 minutes. And thank you for waiting. I know this has been a long meeting so far. So all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We're now in public participation. And anybody would like to address the board, please come up to the mic, and if you could state your name, it would be fine. If you want to be anonymous, well. You can't be anonymous.
yeah,
You
that's
can't.
too late.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hi.
You messed that one up a long time ago.
Sorry. Bobby Goodman. My only comment is, if we are going to look into attendance zones, I hope that we learn from the last time and we don't look at just 2 schools. I hope that we look at all the schools equally and don't separate into just North Park and Ralph R. again. I hope that we look at it equally and distribute the wealth equally. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Anybody else like to address the board?
Wayne Kurlander, 68 Hyler Drive.
Resident.
This is my first time up here under public participation, so it's kind of strange to be able to say whatever I want. Well, within reason. But I do. Most of you have said some really nice things, and it has been over 10 years that I've been in the district, for which I've really enjoyed. And when I came here, this place was not the same. It was not the same. I think I cried in the first week. I drove home. I used to live in Orange County, and for an hour I cried every single night driving home after I was uncovering things. And that was a very difficult thing to do. And I said, geez, I got my work cut out for me. But the district was far from being fiscally sound. We had tax increases that were vastly irregular. As you saw, Kevin pointed that out, and our budgets jumped from here to there, and we've had some charts where they were, up and down. And believe me, this is not a, pat myself on the back, because that's not why I'm doing this. But it helps me to feel better as I reflect and as I, have to move on with what I have to move on with. But the budgets were, based on reactionary needs and were very inconsistent. And you could see that through the, the records that were there. In the years before I arrived, there were very few capital projects. There were a couple $1 million projects, the $2 million projects, and the district was in great disrepair. Since my time at Hyde Park, we've done over $50 million. I think with this project, we're up to $56 million in enhancements. And, I recognize that each year there are unpopular budget reductions. God knows I know it the best. And that my position is not the first to be eliminated, so it's good that it's recognized that, I'm not the only one, and I might not be the last. So no one recognizes more than me the importance of making good, fiscal decisions to safeguard the district and our students as a whole, because that's the most important thing. It has been my career goal to do just that. Over the past 10 years, I've dedicated my life to this district, our students in the Hyde Park community. I started, commuting 5 years back and forth an hour, and then moved closer, and then moved closer. I believe a good leader needs to be active in the town, and so for that reason, I moved to the town, and I made a huge, choice to do that. I joined the Chamber of Commerce and became a board member. I joined NILAF, which is a banking institution that I meet regularly with other business officials. And for the last 8 years, I've represented the district as the president of the Mid-Hudson, New York State ASBO consortium. So, but while I'm working at Hyde Park, my focus has been on reaching and maintaining fiscal balance to allow the district and our students to thrive. And, I feel good about that. Whether it included saving the district a few dollars. People used to say, are you really going after $10? And I said, yeah, I'm going after $10, and that it's true. Whether it was $10 or $1 million, it didn't matter. And, that makes all the difference. This focus, resulted in vast improvements to the district and helped turn around our community. we used to have budget meetings where you couldn't even get, have enough chairs to be in this room. And some of you that are sitting right in front of me understand that. But by creating and ensuring a budget that's transparent and solidly fiscal, we can't even get people to come to our budget input group meetings. Because me and Perry and
Jay.
and Jay. But we've passed all our budgets over the last 10 years and presented to the community and gained their trust. Leveled out the tax impact by providing budgets with minimal impact to the community, things that people could afford. And we created reserve accounts as backups, and all these things you've heard before. One of the big things that we did when I first came here was implement a bus schedule to keep our students in safe transportation equipment while maintaining a leveling borrowing plan for the budget that didn't increase our budget every year. This solid foundation also has enabled us to achieve improvements to our infrastructure by means of capital projects. We've completed a record number of improvements while I've been here. Some of those things include the improvements of the ADA that needed to be completed and the accessibility to our buildings. We gave the district a facelift by replacing roofs and windows and the updating of the exterior facades. And that really brought back and started the historical pride that came back to our magnificent buildings that we have in our district. We did things that were necessary, like replacing the North Park Bridge by creating a bus loop that was dangerous. We updated ancient boilers throughout the district that couldn't work anymore. Installed bleachers at FDR and improved the auditorium. We created an absolutely collegiate athletic arena in restoring our ability to hold home games and meets while showcasing our athletes and bringing back President's pride. And our current project of updating the heating system, which is well underway. Through this time, I've transitioned through some of the toughest and most rewarding times in my life while at Hyde Park School District. I'm the only assistant superintendent when I got my tenure. I was told I was the only assistant superintendent that was tenured in 20 years. So I guess that's something to be proud about. I feel privileged to have worked under the guidance of very strong superintendents like Ray Rychek, who I have a lot of respect for, and Carol Pickering as well. I can't leave her out. I've worked with her for 5 or 6 years, and I've been fortunate to work with the Board of Education, who has been supportive to me through tough times in my life. So I respect that as well. I'm also proud to have hired a top-notch operations team. I couldn't be more proud of them. My business office team, as well as a group of capable individuals who truly care about the well-being of our district's health. I'm confident that I'm leaving the district in good hands. I would like to recognize and thank those special members of my support team. Some of them sitting right there. I'm content to leave the district on a positive note, and I appreciate the comments. I appreciate what you had to say, and will build my future using my experiences at Hyde Park as important building blocks in my professional toolbox. I guess it's said as one door closes, another door opens. But I look forward to beginning a new and fulfilling chapter in my life where my experiences here at Hyde Park will help me enhance another school district. So again, thank you to you all, the community, and everybody for the trust and your support, and thank you. So.
Would anybody else like to address the board? Be a tough one to follow. May I have a motion to close public participation?
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Anybody else like to comment on tenant zones? I, you know, a few weeks, a month ago, I don't know when it was, I read an article about tenant zones in the Albany area, and they had the community agree to floating zones. And the idea was if one school, and they did it with 3 elementary schools, and the idea was that if one seemed to be overcrowded, they gave people in, like, you know, you ever see a Venn diagram with the thing, in those little things, an option, you know, would you like to go somewhere else? And I just thought it was something that we might want to explore. I didn't think in terms of the other elementary schools, but we certainly could do that. I think it's a good idea. I just was thinking about the theming differences between North Park and Ralph Smith. But if we could do it for all one, I personally, I think it might work. It seems to work there. So I thought, why not give it a try? Anybody else want to comment on attendance zones? Or
Yeah,
anything
I
else? Actually,
just wanted to say
Sorry.
that, you know, when we started talking about that, it was a foregone conclusion in my mind that it would be across the entire district.
okay.
And I just wanted to reiterate that as a preliminary step to offer to the lines that were drawn, that would be one place to at least start it as an option.
Any other comment? I think, Wayne, that was a wonderful review. I couldn't have done a better job. Really, you'll be missed here financially. It's gone from very poor to very stable. So we can't thank you enough for that. And the whole community should be aware of that. We are in a fiscal place we are today because of you. Okay. There's no other things? Our next is a board discussion on the voter exit poll. I'm assuming that's, do we want to keep doing it, and do we want to change the current?
I think it was pretty good.
Is there any other information that we're not getting that might, I think what we want to be doing here is there anything we would change here? Is there any, or add any information, given the fact that we try to keep it one page so that people would actually fill them out? I think
You think if we condensed it a little more, we'd get more responses? You know, if we
have less questions.
had less questions?
Yeah, I think,
There are-
yeah, there are things like, you know, do we need to know what town they're living in, you know, for instance? Maybe not.
And if we're not doing, oh, sorry.
I guess I think Doug, you and I
Yeah, we
went over
made
this
this.
last, you know, and we condensed it some from what it had been the previous year. Unless there's a real compelling reason to change it, I would, you know, my thought would be not to change it, because you start to lose some of the statistical nature of it. As soon as you start changing, you can't do a comparison
Right.
year to year.
From year to year,
You
that's
can't be
true.
looking at
That
trend
is
data.
true.
So, my experience with these types of things is that if you want, trying to keep the bulk of it the same year after year, and hopefully it's valuable information, and then have a single question or two that may be the variable, and it may be to address if we've got something. I mean, like
Should we have a,
redistricting or,
Yeah.
attendance zones, or, however, if there's something like that, if there's a hot topic, I guess would be the question, if you want to get, feel the community out on. But other than that, I would advocate for, unless somebody feels strongly that something needs to be changed, not to change it.
I would say that I feel strongly about not changing it.
Okay?
I think that the cleanup that you and Doug did last year was necessary and right on target. And I think long-term, leaving it to be significantly similar to prior years has value in being able to look at trends, as you point out. The only impetus I can see for changing it at this point is if we have a large number of write-in answers for a given topic. So under, several of these, there's the ability to write in another answer. So if we had a significant number of answers along the same line, I would say we add that as a checkbox for the following year. But I think a single page gives us a good amount of information without overloading anybody that agrees to take the 3 minutes it takes to fill it out.
Okay, the only thing I was thinking of was perhaps use the back of it for write in anything you want. Anything that you feel could be improved in the district. You might get some,
That comment's actually already on there in the bottom of it.
well, that's the last one. No, it says, are you in favor of holding concert?
No,
But-
read
Below
the
that,
bottom, bottom, bottom.
little print, the
Kind of in
tiny
fine
print.
print, but it's there.
Oh, let's make it bigger then, because I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's there.
I forgot
And-
all about it.
And do you want,
There's
do
that
you,
eyes thing again.
do you want to
I
ask
know, there I
the
go.
concerts on the night of the vote
I'm old,
question
come on.
again?
I'm sorry.
The last question, do you want to ask that question again? We were satisfied with the answer that we determined we were just going to keep it the same, have the concert there based on, I don't remember what the results
It was
were.
50-50 almost, as I recall.
Was it?
Yeah. Oh, I can look. Wait a minute, I'll tell you.
No, I would say it was not 50-50.
Higher for concerts.
Was it?
All I remember is we determined to keep
I
the
thought it
concert.
was, there was one that I was surprised at.
142 to 84. Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
142.
yeah, okay.
No, 84.
Yeah,
31, no
I was
answers.
thinking of a different one.
So you could make that little tiny statement up to there.
Oh, unless you voted.
If we take that question off, we can put the comment about writing their comments on the back and a little bit bigger if you don't have a question to replace it with.
I think I'd like to leave it there, personally.
Fine with me.
And maybe we
Okay.
just make that last comment in bold then, so
You're not gonna get it much bigger on
the
there.
Wayne
No,
comment
no.
or the,
Okay. So at some point, we're going to have to aggregate all the years to see.
yes, I would
That work.
encourage that. I would like to
Yeah.
see that with the results of this year. Perhaps we could create
Great.
a multi-column result.
Yeah. This year would give us 3 years, and you
Yeah.
can start to see trends.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. So can I have a motion for 9.1, the consent agenda, please?
So moved?
Second?
Any discussion, other than thank you to the employees that are choosing to retire, and thank them for all the years of service, and quite a number of years. I know my children had 3 of the 4, so they were, especially Mrs. Gates, I'll really miss her. But Mrs. Gopal also, who was a favorite of both my children, so. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That moves us down to, where are we? 10.1. May I have a motion for 10.1, special education placements, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have reviewed the package that was presented to us, and I recommend its adoption.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Yeah, motion for 10.2, fund surplus resolution agreement and release, as noted in the agenda, please.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion for 10.3 to accept the internal audit report?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Kevin?
Audit committee met on it and recommends its adoption.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. And, excuse me, may I have a motion for 10.4, the corrective action plan for the internal audit report?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Again, the audit committee met in regard to this, and this is the response to it that Wayne prepared in his office, and I recommend it, or the audit committee recommends its adoption.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Linda helped out a lot, too.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah. May I have a motion for 10.5, volunteer coach? That would be to approve the following individual as volunteer coach for the spring session of the 14-15 school year.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion for 10.6, authorization to execute documents for the DOT interim use and occupancy permit?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? So this is the directional signs outside North Park. All right. All in favor? Opposed? Is that back on? Oh, that's the memorandum. Okay. May I have a motion for 10.7 memorandum of understanding for the HPTA?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion for 10.8, stipulation of settlement for HPTA, as noted in the agenda?
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Kevin, are you going to make this motion, naming
yeah.
of athletic facility?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I think it's a great name, and I think it reflects what that stadium is, really. So,
Wouldn't it be cool to have one of those fireside chats that they run locally, right in the middle of the facility? See if we can
doesn't that burns? Doesn't the turf burn badly when you put a fire on it? No. All right. Anyway, all in favor?
Well, before,
Oh.
sorry, the only discussion I had, again, because I pushed for it, but certainly don't take any credit for the name. Again, Brian Halling, the coach.
Right.
He's a teacher, too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess, just like I said, incredibly clever, and, really, he gets all the credit for coming up with it, and so.
But now he's gonna be walking around with a sign around his neck saying, "I'm incredible."
Yeah. Oh. Okay, do we vote on that yet? No. I have all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion for 10.10, first reading of policies 4326, 5420, 5420R, the regulation, and 6600?
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think you deserve a further up, move it up to 10 column. Always being the last one seems to imply an insignificance to the work you guys are doing, which is incredible.
No,
That's interesting.
the
Double 10.
work that Debbie is doing, and we just follow her lead, that's all.
Just sit and listen.
Okay, well, we didn't vote on that yet either. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Where am I? Am I at public participant? Just want to make sure. Okay, just want to make sure I didn't skip anything. May I have a motion for public participation, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We're now back in public participation. Once again, if you want to address the board, you step to the mic. Try and keep it to 3 minutes, and will make us happy. Anybody? Nancy, how can you come and not, I can't agree with you unless you say something. Me? Okay. May I have a motion to exit public participation, please?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Do we get to respond?
Yes, you may.
Was that a threat, by the way? Waiting a couple?
No, no,
minutes?
no. We have a once-a-year happening where we actually agree with each other. Of course, most of the time, we don't speak, so it doesn't really, it's not that we don't agree, it's just that we only get an opportunity to agree once a year. And besides, it's fun, just making, So, let me get down here, if I can get my machine to work. Okay, I don't think there are any other matters deemed necessary by the board to discuss at this time? Unless somebody does have it? No? Okay. Board subcommittee reports. Well, we had a tech meeting a long time back. That was way before the,
Yeah, I thought that was before
was
the
it?
last meeting.
Oh, I wasn't at the last meeting. Oh, okay, I wasn't, I was
Oh,
off
right.
enjoying myself.
Yeah.
You were well represented.
Yeah, good, okay. That's about it. We were off.
Right.
Okay, upcoming meetings. Tuesday, April 21st, 2015, 7 PM. Board meeting and vote on the BOCES budget here at the district office. Once again, that's Tuesday, April 21st, 7 o'clock here at the district office. Monday, April 27th, 6 PM, district leadership team here at the district office, 6
What
o'clock.
time does that say? 6 o'clock? I think it might, I'll double check the time on that.
Oh, it says 6 here.
Yeah, I have to double check the time, I think.
Okay. Tuesday, May 12th, 4 to 8, voter registration, when it's the last day to register to vote, and it's at Haviland Middle School. There's no reason for a second executive session.
Just a reminder too on these dates too. Again, that the petitions are, as we mentioned earlier, available to run for the board, and they are due on April 20th, which is Monday at 5 PM. So by the 21st meeting, we should be able to
Well,
announce
that'd
who our
be-
candidates are. So,
All right, so there's 10 days,
yeah.
10 or 11 days.
I'm gonna be on
You-
vacation.
You're getting one now.
We'll fill out one for you in absentia.
That's right. Does anybody know his signature yet? We gotta get that. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. Everybody in the audience, thank you for coming.